Okay, so in the final session on Climate Consultant, I'm just going to finish off with the windrows tool, the wind tool, which we got to at the end of the last session. And I did have a bit of a crash with my recording in the lecture, so this recording is not actually the recording made in the lecture. I've recorded it again afterwards. Okay, so here we are back at the windrows, and as you can see up here we are at Finningley. Our weather station is Finningley, which is just the airport north of Sheffield. And here's our wind wheel, as they call it in Climate Consultant. And it's not the same kind of graphical display as a more familiar windrows. So there's actually more information in the Climate Consultant wind wheel. And you can just see here on the right we have a key. And we'll just talk through that in a moment. And as always, in Climate Consultant, if you go up to the Help tool here, User Help, there is a whole range of information about the software to guide you through it. I'll just minimize that for now. So if we go back over to our key here on the windrows, and it's showing you a typical slice here through the windrows. So I suppose the most important thing, the first thing to note, is that the direction of the wind is indicated on the wind wheel. So if the wind is coming from the east, then this piece of graphical data refers to that. So if we look at a typical slice here, what we've got on the inside is the wind speed for the period which is being shown, and you can specify that period exactly. We'll talk about that in a moment. So here we've got the wind speed in meters per second. We've got an average shown here with the midpoint, the sort of orange triangle. We've got a maximum and we've got a minimum. So if we look at, for example, on our chart here, which is now currently showing the whole year, it would suggest that when the wind is coming from the north here, that our maximum wind speed is about 12 meters per second. Our average is about 6 meters per second. And our minimum is in the sort of 1 meter per second. Okay, let's now just look at the outside of the wind wheel. And here we're talking about the percentage of the time. Okay, so it says hours, but it's a percentage. So for the period that you are analyzing, what percentage of that period is the wind coming from that direction? So if we go back to our sort of north example here, which is our biggest frequency on this particular chart, and you can see that that corresponds to, if we follow it around, to about 10%. So 10% of the year in this instance, because we're looking at, we're currently looking at a month. Okay, looking at the month of June. I'll come back to that in a moment. 10% the wind is coming from this direction, but important to note is that if we just move a few degrees to the west, then about 8% of the time we're getting the wind from that direction. A few degrees to the east, we're getting about 6%, and then if we move again, we're getting about 8%. So clearly sort of indicating that the prevailing wind for this month is coming from the north. Okay, if we then look further into the analysis, what you can see is we've got some additional information. We've got the relative humidity shown here with the green, and that's an average for the time period. So kind of useful because you can look at the direction of the wind, and at the same time you can consider what's the relative humidity for that period, that direction. And then we also have the temperature, which is a dry bulb temperature for the air temperature. And again, gives you that kind of information about what's the temperature when the wind is coming from that direction. Okay, so just to go back over here to the left, where this is where we define our time period. So I'm just going to first of all put it onto all months. So this will give us the windrows for the complete year. And you can see that the windrows changed immediately there. Okay, so that's giving us the whole year. So if you wanted to look at a particular location and get a sort of indication of the wind for that whole year, then you could put it onto the year here. Okay. Also, what I forgot to mention is there is a color code up here for temperature and relative humidity, as indicated on the graph here, on the wind wheel here. So that was selecting all months. Now let's look at some selected months. So let's say for example, let's look from January through to March. And as you can see, the graph immediately changes, and we can analyze just that period. We can look at a single month. So here, let's go for January, and you see you get a very different picture now because we're just looking at January. Most of the wind shown here in the south, and sort of different wind speeds, quite clear. Now, you know it's on the temperature, because our average temperature is in this sort of blue, the 0 to 22. We're not getting any different color here. Possibly if we look at a different month, let's look at July. No, let's look at September. Let's look at August. No, we're still, yeah, as expected, we're still in this sort of average of 0 to 22 degrees. If you were looking at other countries around the world, you would get a different color code here. You are getting a different color code for the relative humidity. Yeah. You can look at one day in particular, but I'm not really sure how how useful that is, because we can't design for the wind on a daily basis. So yeah, I wouldn't suggest use that. But I think using the month can be useful, or specifying certain months of the year. Now you can also select hours, and I suppose this could be relevant if you were, let's say, if you were designing for wind and you were only interested in the, let's say for example, the daytime wind, then you could look there just for certain hours. So here, for example, I've specified from 8 AM till 6 PM, and we're just getting that wind situation for the daylight hours. Maybe in different climate zones, that there are kind of much more notable wind changes throughout the day. Certainly in a maritime location close to the coast, you would be seeing very different wind situations throughout the day. So so the information is there based upon the weather data of that weather station. I'm just going to put it back to all hours over here, and we're currently on 1 month, as you can see, and there is quite a handy button here, next month, which will let you just scroll through month by month, look at the sort of different wind conditions. And there is an animation function here at the bottom, where again you can animate it. I'll just put that back onto selected months, for all months actually. So this will animate, here I'm animating monthly. If we just click on start, then it will slowly cycle through month by month. And if you look up here, you're getting the month shown. Quite useful. Just stop that. Let's go daily. Start that. And you'll notice on a daily basis, there are many directions which are getting no wind on a particular day. But as I say, I think you'd find that quite difficult to use as a design tool. It's much too detailed, really. Okay, let's just pause that there. But let's just stop it. Okay, so that's the basics of the wind wheel. And in Climate Consultant, the wind wheel is actually the final data analysis in the software. So we'll stop there. But just before I finish this video, just to remind you that although you can use the back buttons here to navigate back and next, you can jump up at the top here. You can jump to any of the analysis much quicker. So you don't have to you don't have to use the sort of back and forwards buttons. You can just jump to whichever analysis you need to use. Okay, there's our 3D. Equally, you can jump and change your criteria, your comfort model, and your help, we've already mentioned, and file. Under file here, you can start a new project, you can change units, export data, weather data, and there's some instructions for printing, which I think we mentioned before, are fairly simple. It's a screen grab. If we just go back to the wind wheel, you can't actually, although they're calling it an animation here, there's no sort of inbuilt facility to export that as a video file. But of course, what you could do very easily, I'll just go back here, is simply do a screenshot, move to the next month, screenshot, continue that. That'll give you a series of stills, which you can of course assemble in a video editor or in a sort of PowerPoint slideshow if you wished. Okay, so that's Climate Consultant. So this is the third of the short videos on Climate Consultant, and yeah, kind of encourage you to use it, encourage you to play with it. Incredibly useful, particularly when you're working in a climate zone that you're not familiar with.